The Senate Judiciary Committee has completed its first day of hearings for President Trump's third Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett. The hearing was largely scripted, consisting of opening statements from Barrett and the committee members ahead of questioning, which begins on Tuesday. President Trump looks on track to appoint the most Supreme Court justices since Ronald Reagan, and that's just in one term. He largely has Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to thank for that. The Kentucky Republican helped Mr. Trump reshape the federal judiciary from the high court down. After Justice Antonin Scalia died 237 days before the last election, McConnell held the seat open, refusing to consider nominees until the next inauguration. But after the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg last month, Senate Republicans decided to move forward. The top Republican on the committee, South Carolina's Lindsey Graham, acknowledged his party's rush to confirm Barrett in his opening statement, saying they plan to use the power available to them.
This is an election year. We're confirming the judge in an election year after the voting has occurred. What will happen is that my Democratic colleagues will say, this has never been done, and they're right in this regard. Nobody's, I think, has ever been confirmed in an election year past July. The bottom line is Justice Ginsburg, when asked about this several years ago, said that a president serves for 4 years, not 3. There's nothing unconstitutional about this process. This is a vacant.
Senate Democrats focused their opposition to Barrett's nomination on health care. That's because 1 week after the election, the Supreme Court will hear arguments on a Trump administration-backed challenge to the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. They brought along photos of constituents who got health care coverage because of the 2010 law. Here's how Hawaii's Mazie Hirono described it after the hearing.
No, she is being nominated for the very purpose of striking down the Affordable Care Act, something they couldn't do in the last 10 years. This is Jordan. She is a teacher in Hawaii. She has such a rare blood condition that she needs medication that will cost her $500,000 a year. There's no way that she can afford that. And it's the Affordable Care Act that is enabling her to live.
Judge Barrett used her opening statement to introduce herself and her family. She described her ideology as molded by the late Justice Scalia, for whom she clerked for in the late 90s.
It was the content of Justice Scalia's reasoning that shaped me. His judicial philosophy was straightforward. A judge must apply the law as it is written, not as she wishes it were. Sometimes that approach meant reaching results that he did not like. But as he put it in one of his best-known opinions, that is what it means to say that we have a government of laws and not of men.
CBS News Chief Legal Correspondent Jan Crawford joins me now from Washington. Hi there, Jan. So we heard a bit of Judge Barrett explaining her ideology in the mold of the late Justice Scalia there. But for those of us who are not constitutional scholars, what's at the root of this debate over originalism or textualism?
Right, and I suspect we're going to be hearing a lot of those two words tomorrow. I mean, this is kind of boilerplate conservative legal philosophy, but Justice Scalia was the big proponent of it and really the big stickler for it. It's where you look at the Constitution and the words of the Constitution and how the founders meant those words to be, not how it might be living like liberals think and adapt as our times change. So a conservative like Scalia would say that we've got to look at what the founders meant by that, and if it's not in there, it's not in there, and then Congress has to step up, or the state governments and legislatures have to step up to make those kind of policy changes. As far as textualism goes, that's how you look at federal statutes, and there are a lot of liberals who say they're textualists too. That just doesn't always break conservative liberal lines, and that's when you look at the words of a statute and not what Congress might have meant or what the legislative history might show or what the purpose might have been, but what the words actually say.
Well, let's take a look at the ideological makeup of the court right now. As it stands, there are 5 justices on the conservative side who were appointed by Republican presidents and 3 on the liberal side appointed by Democrats. What impact, Jan, could adding a 48-year-old conservative justice have on the future of the Supreme Court?
Oh, well, I mean, this Supreme Court could be solidly conservative, for many, many years to come, and that would have a far-reaching impact. If you think about, and I think you teed this up really nicely, because Judge Barrett says that she really sees the law much like Justice Scalia. She is replacing a liberal justice who was an icon who didn't see the law like that at all. So that potentially could really shift the court on some of those cases with her philosophy coming in. So let's just look, and I suspect we'll see some of this tomorrow, at cases where Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg saw the cases differently. Justice Scalia, for example, the originalist approach, that would mean that he would not find a constitutional right to gay marriage. It would mean he doesn't agree that there's a constitutional right to abortion. He has supported and upheld state restrictions on abortion as a result of that. So affirmative action, you can go on all these cases where Justice Scalia and that kind of reasoning would differ wildly from how Justice Ginsburg, a liberal, would have decided it.
All right, so keeping that in mind, in the lead up to the 2016 election, President Trump said he wanted to appoint pro-life judges to the Supreme Court. At the time, he said he thought Roe versus Wade would be overturned, quote, if we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on. You talked about various issues there, including abortion. So how might Judge Barrett play into that calculus?
I think it's really hard to say right now. She has said previously, publicly, that she thinks that this Supreme Court would not overturn Roe versus Wade, but would allow restrictions, more restrictions on abortion. That's what I think we would see from the court. Even before, you only really had 2 justices when Justice Scalia was on the court who were adamant that Roe versus Wade should be overturned. That was Scalia and now Justice Thomas. So you've got a long way to go to get to 5 justices. And Judge Barrett, if she is Justice Barrett, then has to look at the meaning of precedent. And just because you may disagree with the case that the Supreme Court decided 30, 40 years ago doesn't mean that now you can overturn it, even if you would have ruled differently. That's a principle called stare decisis. Let the decision from the previous courts stand. You're going to hear a lot about that tomorrow, too. What are her views on precedent? Will she respect these cases that the Supreme Court has decided years and years in the past? Or is she going to be willing to say, no, this was wrong then, and it's wrong now, and we need to throw it out? Right now, only 1 justice on the court has a pretty aggressive view along those lines, and that's Justice Thomas.
All right, Jan Crawford for us. Jan, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Let's bring in Nancy Cordes and Tina Nguyen. Joining me now with more. Nancy is CBS News chief congressional correspondent, and Tina is a White House reporter for Politico. Welcome to you both. Nancy, I want to start with you and the timeline here for Judge Barrett's confirmation. We're now 22 days from the end of the election, 29 days until hearings on the Affordable Care Act. How quickly are Senate Republicans trying to move?
They want to move as quickly as humanly possible, Elaine, and that means finishing up her confirmation hearings this week and then most likely holding a vote in the Judiciary Committee late next week. And that would tee up a full Senate vote sometime the week after that, a few days before the presidential election. That's what Judiciary Chairman Lindsey Graham says he is aiming for right now, and we haven't heard any differently from the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell.
Well, this weekend, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says Democrats will not supply the quorum when a vote occurs in the committee or on the floor. Explain what that means, Nancy, and if Democrats have the tools to delay Barrett's confirmation.
What that means is that all the Republicans are going to have to show up. They can't phone it in. They can't appear remotely when it comes time for a vote. That's not allowed anyway when it comes to a vote on the full Senate floor, because Democrats are not going to allow for any numbers that are below the number that Republicans would need to confirm Judge Coney Barrett once and for all. So this is something that, Democrats or any minority party could do at any time. Usually they don't. It's just sort of of an unspoken pact between the two parties, but that pact has kind of been broken because Democrats feel that there's a great deal of hypocrisy at play here, where Republicans blocked the Democratic Supreme Court nominee back in 2016, Merrick Garland, and now are rushing their own nominee through at a time when, as the top Democrat on the committee put it, Dianne Feinstein, saying that people in 40 different states are already voting. So they clearly believe that this is an unfair timeline, and they're not going to do anything to help Republicans get over the finish line.
Well, Tina, President Trump has said he wants Justice Barrett confirmed before the election so she can rule on it. The Supreme Court last intervened in an election-related case in 2000, halting the Florida recount. Why does the president want this?
The president wants to make sure that there is at least the appearance of a court that is whole and ostensibly on his side. One of the issues that Trump has been running on in this election is I want to put conservatives on the Supreme Court, but also that Joe Biden, his opponent, is going to stack the court in a direction favorable to Democrats and liberals going forward should he win. So if Trump were to win and he has a Supreme Court justice who is conservative, he seems to have a good chance of getting any sort of election challenge passed in his favor, especially considering that Amy Coney Barrett was one of the people who worked on the Florida recount case. And if Biden comes in, then Trump is in a situation where he can start challenging it and saying, oh, look, Joe Biden is trying to say that I did something wrong, or even worse, Joe Biden is going to try to put a liberal on, or he's going to add more justices to the Supreme Court. And hello, base, you really don't want that.
Yeah. Well, Nancy, let's talk about the safety of this hearing. You had Utah Senator Mike Lee, who tested positive for COVID-19 a week and a half ago. There were two 87-year-old senators, in that room. What was done to ensure their safety?
Well, there are a whole host of new safety protocols, both that have been imposed by the Senate over the past few months, but also imposed specifically for this hearing. So the configuration of the room was different, allowing for more social distancing between senators. You didn't have any members of the public in there the way you normally would for a big confirmation hearing like this. I just had a small group of Amy Coney Barrett's family and supporters sitting there behind her, far fewer reporters than you usually see in one of these hearings, just to keep the numbers down. Democrats wanted Republicans to go an extra step, and they wanted Republicans to allow for testing of everybody who was coming into that room. The Judiciary Chair said that that was unnecessary. Lindsey Graham argued he had been tested last week and that they haven't been testing people for other hearings all this month, so there was no reason to do it this time. Clearly, Democrats arguing that they aren't taking enough safety precautions, and in fact, the vice presidential nominee for the Democratic ticket, Kamala Harris, appeared remotely for that very reason, saying as a precaution, she was going to sort of beam in from her office here at the Capitol.
Tina, tell us about this controversy of the Trump campaign using Dr. Anthony Fauci in a campaign ad.
So they recently used some of Fauci's words describing the White House's overall response to the COVID-19 crisis, with Fauci, I'm just going to paraphrase here, saying there's no one working as hard. When he was referring to the entirety of the administration, Trump took that clip and the campaign took that clip and then just used it as Fauci and contextualized it as Fauci praising the president. Now, Fauci has definitely gone on the record criticizing the administration on certain aspects, saying that he doesn't necessarily agree with Trump on the science, but he's also become a huge pop culture validating icon in his own right. So if Trump can get Fauci seeming to praise him in a campaign ad, that obviously does well for Trump, but that clearly doesn't reflect Dr. Fauci's opinion or stated position on the matter, which is he's never endorsed a single political candidate in his 5 decades of work. So that's where Fauci is coming from.
Right, yeah, he was very quick to make that statement after this campaign ad appeared. Nancy, this morning, President Trump urged Senate Republicans to move even more quickly, saying that they should pull back Democrats' speaking time, approve Barrett's nomination, and, quote, go for stimulus for the people. Is there any hope that economic relief could be coming soon, or will the Senate's focus on the confirmation process essentially stand in the way of that?
Well, it's only one thing that could stand in the way. The other big thing that will stand in the way is the fact that Senate Republicans have made it very clear that they do not have an appetite right now for another massive spending bill, the kind that is being negotiated right now between Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Senate Republicans, many of them say they back a very small package. Well, if you can call hundreds of billions of dollars small, but they back something that's, maybe in the $300 to $500 billion range, whereas what Mnuchin is talking about right now is $1.8 to $2 trillion. And part of the challenge is that the president might have been able to sort of talk some of these Senate Republicans into it, but his own position has changed so frequently that I don't think they really have the confidence that if they stick with him and deliver this, that he won't just change his mind again. Remember, it was just last week that he said he was pulling out of the talks altogether because Democrats wanted too much. Then he said he wanted even more money than Democrats wanted. He sent Mnuchin back to the bargaining table with a new offer. So those talks continue, but the Senate's Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, has made it very clear that, in his words, it's very unlikely that anything is going to pass before the election. He says he hopes that the two sides can work together in the months to come, but clearly not a lot of urgency on the Republican side, at least in the Senate, for getting something done really fast.
So, Tina, your latest article discusses how even though these negotiations are stalling, the president's base has, quote, turbocharged their support after his return from the hospital. Tell us more about that.
So over the past week, Trump has taken, maybe 20 different positions on 20 different subjects and started tweeting 900 different things in all caps, followed by vote in all caps. And even though it's just sort of inconsistent and jumbled, a lot of his supporters feel as if the core parts of Trump's personality are still there. He is still vehemently anti-Democrat. He is acting in a belligerent art of the deal style negotiation, which kind of focuses on brinksmanship. He's belligerent, he's energetic. Even though he's got COVID, he's still out there doing his job. He's in the Oval Office engaging in some sort of COVID presenteeism. So that base is not going to leave him, and they're especially not going to leave him if he continues to act the way that they've always liked him acting.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to read about just how, in fact, that connection that the president has carefully cultivated has maintained so strong throughout all of this. All right, Nancy Cordes and Tina Nguyen, thank you both very much. Really appreciate it.